When I discovered my parents had booked the entire family vacation using my credit card, but somehow forgot to include me in any of the arrangements, I made a decision that would change our family dynamics forever. What happened next taught them that generosity should never be mistaken for weakness, and that the person paying the bills deserves more than an afterthought. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification from my banking app arrived at precisely 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, just as I was reviewing quarterly reports for the marketing agency I had built from nothing over the past 8 years. The alert showed a charge of $12,847 to my business credit card from Luxury Escapes Travel Services. My heart skipped as I stared at the amount, trying to recall any business travel I might have authorized or forgotten about. I opened the full banking application and examined the transaction details more carefully. The charge had been processed that afternoon for what appeared to be multiple airline tickets and accommodation bookings. The merchant code indicated leisure travel rather than business expenses, which made the substantial amount even more puzzling. I had not booked any personal travel recently, and certainly nothing approaching 5 figures in cost. My first thought was credit card fraud. Someone had gained access to my business account information and was using it for expensive vacation bookings. I reached for my phone to call the fraud prevention hotline, then hesitated as a more troubling possibility occurred to me. I navigated to my email and searched for any correspondence from Luxury Escapes Travel Services that might explain the mysterious charge. What I discovered in my inbox made my stomach drop and my hands shake with a combination of disbelief and rage. There were indeed multiple confirmation emails from the travel agency, but they were not the result of fraudulent activity. The bookings had been made using my credit card information, but the primary contact listed was my mother, Patricia Hamilton. The reservation details showed a 2-week luxury vacation to the Maldives for 8 family members, scheduled for the following month. I scrolled through the booking confirmations with growing incredulity. The itinerary included first-class flights for everyone, accommodations at one of the most exclusive resorts in the region, private transfers, spa treatments, diving excursions, and premium dining packages. Every detail had been carefully planned and expensively arranged. The reservation names included my parents, my 2 brothers with their wives and children, and my sister with her husband. My name appeared nowhere in the travel documents, except as the credit card holder responsible for the charges. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My family had planned and booked an elaborate vacation using my money, but they had not included me in the trip itself. I was apparently good enough to pay for their luxury holiday, but not important enough to be invited. To participate in it, the exclusion felt both calculated and casual, as if my role as the family financier was so established that they had not even considered including me in the planning or the travel. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of my professional success, staring at travel confirmations for a family vacation I was funding, but not attending. The irony was suffocating. I had worked 18-hour days for years to build a business that could provide financial security and opportunities for experiences like this. I had sacrificed relationships, personal time, and countless opportunities for immediate gratification to create the kind of success that could support elaborate family adventures. Yet here I was, learning about my family's vacation plans through banking notifications and email confirmations, treated as a convenient funding source rather than a family member worthy of inclusion. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Hope you don't mind that we used your card for the family trip. We can discuss payment arrangements when we get back. So excited for everyone to finally have a proper vacation together." casual tone of her message, combined with the assumption that I would simply accept both the financial responsibility and the exclusion, made my hands tremble with suppressed anger. The phrase, "everyone to finally have a proper vacation together," was particularly galling. Everyone except me, apparently. The person whose financial contribution made the entire experience possible was somehow not considered part of everyone who deserved to participate in the family bonding experience. I walked to my kitchen and poured a glass of wine, trying to process the complex emotions swirling through my mind. This was not the first time my family had treated me as a convenient resource, rather than a valued family member. Over the years, I had funded family emergencies, educational expenses, medical bills, and various financial crises without complaint. I'd co-signed loans, provided business advice, and opened doors through my professional network whenever family members needed assistance. In return, I had received gratitude that felt performative and inclusion that seemed conditional. Family gatherings often revolved around discussions of my brother's career developments, my sister's children's achievements, or my parents' retirement plans. My business success was acknowledged primarily in terms of how it could benefit others, rather than celebrated as a personal accomplishment worthy of recognition and respect. The pattern had become so established that I had almost stopped noticing it. Almost. But this vacation booking represented such a blatant example of being taken for granted that I could no longer ignore the fundamental imbalance in my family relationships. They viewed my resources as communal property while treating my presence as optional. I opened my laptop and began researching the specific bookings they had made using my credit card. The resort they had chosen was indeed one of the most prestigious in the Maldives, featuring overwater villas, world-class dining, and exclusive amenities that commanded premium prices. The flights were all booked in business class, with seat selections that indicated they had planned the seating arrangements carefully to ensure family members could sit together during the long journey. The attention to detail in their planning made their exclusion of me even more pointed. This was not an oversight or a miscommunication. They had invested considerable time and effort in researching options, comparing amenities, and coordinating schedules. They had made deliberate choices about accommodations, activities, and arrangements. At no point during this extensive planning process had anyone suggested that the person funding the entire expedition might want to participate in it. I calculated the total cost of their planned vacation, including the charges that had already been processed and the additional expenses that would likely be incurred during the trip. The amount exceeded what many families spent on housing for an entire year. It represented a significant portion of my business profits and would require careful budget adjustments to accommodate without impacting my company's growth plans. The financial burden was substantial, but the emotional cost was far greater. The vacation booking crystallized years of subtle dismissal and casual exploitation that I had rationalized or overlooked in the interest of family harmony. I had convinced myself that providing financial support was a way of showing love and maintaining connections with family members whose lives had taken different paths than mine. But love and support should be reciprocal. Healthy family relationships involve mutual respect, consideration, and recognition of each member's value beyond their utility to others. What my family had demonstrated through this vacation booking was that they viewed me primarily as a resource to be accessed, rather than a person to be cherished. I thought about my childhood and the dreams we had shared about family adventures and exotic destinations. My parents had often talked about taking family trips to beautiful places once their financial situation improved. I had worked diligently, in school and later in my career, partly motivated by the vision of being able to provide those kinds of experiences for the people I loved. The irony was that I had achieved the financial success necessary to make those childhood dreams reality. But I was apparently not invited to participate in living them. I had become the means to their ends, rather than a participant in shared experiences and memories. My sister called as I was reviewing the resort's website and examining photos of the luxury accommodations my money would be providing for everyone except me. I answered the phone with carefully controlled neutrality, curious to see how she would frame the situation now that they knew I was aware of their travel plans. "Sophie," she said, with the artificially bright tone she used when she wanted something. I hope Mom explained about the vacation booking. We were so excited when she found this amazing deal and realized we could finally do a proper family trip. The resort looks absolutely incredible, and the kids are so excited about snorkeling and seeing tropical fish. The casual presumption in her voice that I would simply accept their decision was staggering. She was calling not to apologize for the exclusion or to invite me to join them, but to ensure I was comfortable with financing their adventure. The conversation proceeded as if my role as funding source was so established that it required no discussion or negotiation. "It sounds like you've planned everything very thoroughly," I replied, keeping my voice even. "When did you decide on the Maldives?" "Oh, we've been researching options for months," she said enthusiastically. "Mum found this travel agent who specializes in luxury family vacations, and we spent weeks comparing different resorts and activities. We wanted to make sure we picked something really special, since it's been so long since we've all been able to travel together." The phrase, "all been able to travel together," hung in the air between us. All except me, the person whose credit card was making their definition of all financially possible. The exclusion was so complete that she seemed genuinely unaware of how her words sounded to the person she was asking to fund the experience. "That's quite an investment in family time," I said carefully. "I imagine the total cost is quite substantial, for accommodations and flights for 8 people. "Well, yes," she admitted, her tone becoming slightly defensive. "But you know how rare it is for all of us to have the same time available, and the kids are getting older, so we won't have many more opportunities like this. Mom thought you would understand how important this kind of family bonding experience is." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with my sister providing elaborate details about the planned activities, the excitement of the children, and the logistical challenges of coordinating schedules for such a large group. She spoke with genuine enthusiasm about snorkeling expeditions, sunset dinners, and spa treatments that would create lasting memories for the entire family. Not once during the conversation did she acknowledge that I might want to participate in creating those memories. Not once did she suggest that the person funding the experience might enjoy snorkeling, sunset dinners, or spa treatments. Not once did she seem to recognize that excluding me from a family bonding experience while using my money to pay for it was fundamentally problematic. After ending the call with my sister, I sat in my office staring at the travel confirmations spread across my desk. The emotional weight of the situation was overwhelming, but beneath the hurt and anger, a different feeling was beginning to emerge. For the first time in years, I was seeing my family relationships with complete clarity, unfiltered by the desire to maintain harmony or the hope that things would eventually change. This vacation booking was not an isolated incident or a thoughtless mistake. It was the logical culmination of years of established patterns where my value to the family was measured primarily in terms of financial contribution rather than personal connection. They had become so comfortable treating me as a resource that they had stopped considering me as a person. The realization was painful, but also liberating. I had spent years accepting less than I deserved from people who should have valued me. Most telling myself that providing financial support was equivalent to receiving emotional support, I had confused being useful with being loved, being needed with being respected. But authentic relationships require reciprocity, consideration, and genuine care for each other's feelings and experiences. What my family had offered me was a transactional arrangement where my financial contributions were appreciated, while my personal needs and desires were largely ignored. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I prepared for bed that night, I made a decision that would fundamentally alter my family relationships forever. I would not simply accept their casual exploitation disguised as family togetherness. I would not continue financing experiences I was not invited to share. I would not allow my generosity to be mistaken for weakness, or my love to be taken for granted. The next morning, I would begin demonstrating that the person who pays for family experiences deserves to be treated as family, not as a convenient funding source. They had made their priorities clear through their actions. Now I would make mine equally clear through my response. The days of being the family's financial resource without being considered the family's valued member were about to end. They were going to learn that respect is not optional when you want someone's support, and that inclusion is not negotiable when you want someone's contribution. My family was about to discover that I had not achieved my success by accepting less than I deserved, and I was not going to start accepting it now, even from them. Especially from them. The vacation they had planned using my credit card was about to become a lesson in consequences, respect, and the difference between being needed and being valued. They would remember this experience for the rest of their lives, but not for the reasons they currently expected. The following morning arrived with unusual clarity of purpose. I had awakened at 5:30, my mind already sharp and focused on the task ahead. The emotional turmoil of the previous evening had crystallized into something far more powerful: strategic determination. For the first time in years, I would approach my family relationships with the same analytical rigor I applied to business challenges. I prepared my morning coffee and settled into my home office with a legal pad, determined to document the full scope of my family's financial dependency and my own pattern of enabling their presumptuous behavior. What emerged over the next 3 hours was a comprehensive analysis that shocked me with its systematic nature and staggering financial implications. The vacation booking to the Maldives represented merely the latest and most brazen example of a pattern that had been escalating for nearly a decade. I began by reviewing my personal and business financial records, categorizing every payment, loan, gift, and financial favor I had provided to family members since launching my marketing agency. The numbers were sobering. Over the past 8 years, I had contributed over $230,000 to various family financial needs, emergencies, and requests. This figure did not include the numerous smaller amounts for gifts, meals, or casual expenses that I had never bothered to track carefully. My brother Marcus had received $47,000 in various forms over the years. This included a $20,000 loan to help with his mortgage down payment when his credit was insufficient for the full amount, $12,000 to cover his son's private school tuition during a period of unemployment, and $15,000 for his wife's medical expenses when their insurance coverage proved inadequate. The remaining amounts covered smaller emergencies, car repairs, and various other requests that had seemed reasonable at the time. My younger brother David had received $38,000, primarily concentrated in the past 3 years, as he attempted to establish his freelance consulting business. I had provided startup capital, covered his health insurance premiums during the transition period, and funded multiple business development activities, including conference attendance, professional certification programs, and marketing materials. Additionally, I had used my professional network extensively to generate client referrals and business opportunities for his struggling venture. My sister Rebecca had been the recipient of $52,000 in various forms of support. The largest single amount was $30,000 for her husband's medical bills following a serious accident that left them with substantial debt despite insurance coverage. The remaining amounts included funding for her children's extracurricular activities, emergency home repairs, and multiple smaller requests that had accumulated significantly over time. My parents had received the largest total amount, $93,000. This included a major contribution to their home renovation project, assistance with my father's business expansion attempt that had ultimately failed, coverage of various medical expenses not fully covered by their retirement insurance, and regular smaller amounts for travel, gifts for grandchildren, and discretionary expenses that they had difficulty affording on their retirement income. The financial analysis revealed several disturbing patterns that I had not recognized while the individual transactions were occurring. First, the frequency of requests had increased dramatically over time as family members became more comfortable approaching me for financial assistance. What had begun as occasional emergency help had evolved into regular expectations of support for both necessary expenses and discretionary spending. Second, the amounts requested had grown larger over time as my business success became more evident and my willingness to help became established. Early requests had been for modest amounts to address genuine emergencies. Recent requests involved substantial sums for activities and purchases that were clearly beyond their natural financial capabilities. Third, the repayment performance had deteriorated significantly over time. Early loans had been repaid according to agreed schedules, often with expressions of genuine gratitude and acknowledgement of the sacrifice involved. Recent financial assistance had been provided with increasingly vague repayment terms, and actual repayment had become rare. Most concerning, family members had stopped treating these transactions as loans at all, apparently considering them gifts or entitlements based on my financial success. Fourth, the requests had expanded beyond genuine emergencies to include lifestyle enhancements, convenience purchases, and luxury experiences that they desired but could not afford through their own resources. The Maldives vacation represented the culmination of this trend, using my financial resources to fund an elaborate luxury experience while excluding me from participating in the benefits. The pattern analysis revealed that my family had systematically trained themselves to view my financial resources as supplementary to their own income rather than as my personal assets earned through professional effort and business risk. They had become comfortable making financial decisions that exceeded their capabilities because they had learned that I would provide the additional funding necessary to bridge the gap between their desires and their means. More troubling was the realization that this financial dependency had not fostered gratitude or closer family relationships. Instead, it had created a sense of entitlement that diminished their appreciation for my contributions while increasing their expectations for future support. The vacation booking demonstrated that they had become so comfortable with accessing my resources that they no longer felt obligated to include me in decisions about how those resources would be used. I spent considerable time reviewing the communication patterns surrounding these financial transactions. Early requests had been accompanied by detailed explanations of the circumstances, genuine expressions of difficulty in asking for help, and specific plans for repayment. The conversations had acknowledged the sacrifice involved and the impact on my financial planning, Recent communications had become increasingly casual and presumptuous. Requests were presented as statements of need rather than appeals for assistance. Repayment discussions were avoided or deflected. Most significantly, there was minimal acknowledgement of the impact on my financial situation or appreciation for the effort required to generate the income being redirected to their needs. The vacation booking represented the ultimate evolution of this pattern. They had not even bothered to request permission before using my credit card information. The communication had been after the fact, presented as a fait accompli that I was expected to accept without complaint. The tone suggested that my financial contribution was so predictable that advanced discussion was unnecessary. This analysis forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own role in creating these dysfunctional patterns. My desire to be helpful and maintain family harmony had prevented me from establishing appropriate boundaries around financial assistance. I had consistently prioritized their comfort over my own financial security and had enabled behavior that ultimately diminished respect for both my resources and my person. I had confused being generous with being wise, being loving with being permissive. My willingness to provide financial assistance without requiring accountability or reciprocity had not strengthened family relationships. Instead, it had created transactional dynamics that reduced my value in their minds to my utility as a funding source. The business lessons I had learned about enabling versus empowering applied directly to these family situations. In professional contexts, I understood that providing resources without requiring accountability typically produced dependency rather than improvement. I recognized that sustainable relationships required mutual benefit and reciprocal respect. I knew that giving people more than they had earned often diminished their appreciation rather than increasing their gratitude. Yet I had consistently applied different standards to family relationships, telling myself that love required unconditional financial support and that family bonds transcended normal relationship dynamics. This double standard had been costly, both financially and emotionally, creating the very problems I had been trying to avoid through my generosity. The strategic assessment extended beyond financial analysis to examine the broader family dynamics that had enabled this exploitative pattern. I reviewed years of family gatherings, conversations, and interactions to identify the subtle ways my contributions had been minimized while my utility had been maximized. Family celebrations consistently focused on other people's achievements, while treating my business success as a convenient resource rather than a personal accomplishment worthy of recognition. Conversations about my work typically centered on how my professional connections or financial capabilities could benefit other family members rather than celebrating my achievements or supporting my goals. My opinions and preferences were regularly dismissed or overruled in family decisions, even when I was expected to provide financial support for the outcomes. The vacation booking represented the extreme end of this pattern, making elaborate plans using my money while excluding my input entirely from the decision-making process. The emotional labor in family relationships was similarly imbalanced. I consistently made effort to attend events, remember important dates, provide support during difficult times, and maintain connections with extended family members. This investment was treated as expected rather than appreciated, while similar effort from other family members was celebrated and acknowledged. The analysis revealed that my family had developed sophisticated psychological mechanisms for justifying their exploitation. While maintaining their self-image as loving family members, they framed my financial contributions as evidence of my love for them, rather than recognizing the sacrifice involved. They interpreted my willingness to help as proof that I did not need the money, rather than understanding that I chose to prioritize their needs over my own financial goals. Most insidiously, they had learned to present their requests in ways that made refusal seem selfish or uncaring. Financial assistance was framed as family loyalty rather than personal favor. My resources were discussed as family assets rather than individual earnings. Their needs were presented as my responsibility rather than their challenge to address through their own efforts. This psychological manipulation had been effective because it exploited my genuine love for them and my desire to contribute to family well-being. They had learned to leverage my positive qualities against me, using my generosity as a weapon to extract resources while providing minimal reciprocal benefit. The strategic assessment concluded with a clear understanding of the fundamental changes required to establish healthier family relationships. I needed to implement boundaries that protected my financial resources while encouraging family members to develop greater self-reliance. I needed to require accountability and reciprocity in our interactions while maintaining appropriate emotional connections. Most importantly, I needed to demonstrate that respect and inclusion were prerequisites for support rather than optional extras that could be dispensed with once financial contributions were secured. The vacation booking had provided the perfect opportunity to establish these new standards in a way that would be memorable and instructive for all involved. The person who had built a successful business by understanding consequences, accountability, and strategic thinking was about to apply those same principles to family relationships. They were about to learn that love and respect must coexist, that generosity requires appreciation, and that financial support comes with behavioral expectations. The Maldives vacation they had planned using my resources was about to become an expensive education in relationship dynamics, personal boundaries, and the true cost of taking family members for granted. The lessons they would learn would be far more valuable than any luxury resort experience, and far more lasting than any tropical vacation memories. Their assumption that I would quietly accept their exploitation was about to be proven dramatically incorrect. The third day following my discovery of the unauthorized vacation booking marked a fundamental shift in my approach to family relationships. After completing my comprehensive financial analysis and strategic assessment, I recognized that intellectual understanding of the problem was insufficient. Transformation required decisive action that would establish new boundaries and demonstrate the consequences of exploitative behavior. I scheduled the entire morning for developing a response strategy that would address both the immediate vacation situation and the broader patterns of financial manipulation that had characterized my family relationships for nearly a decade. The approach needed to be surgical in its precision, while unmistakable in its message about future expectations for respectful treatment. The primary objective was not punishment or revenge, despite the substantial hurt and anger I felt regarding their casual exclusion from an experience I was funding. Instead, the goal was education through consequences, demonstrating that financial support and personal respect were inseparably linked. They needed to understand that my resources were not an entitlement program available for their convenience without corresponding obligations for inclusion and appreciation. I began by researching the specific terms and conditions of their travel bookings to understand the cancellation policies, refund procedures, and modification options available. The luxury travel agency they had selected offered different levels of protection depending on the timing of changes and the specific services involved. Flight cancellations within 14 days of departure would incur substantial penalties, while accommodation changes might be possible with appropriate notice and justification. The resort booking presented more complex considerations. The overwater villas they had selected were part of an exclusive package that required full payment in advance with limited modification flexibility. However, the booking had been made using my credit card information, which provided certain consumer protection rights that could be leveraged if necessary. The travel insurance they had purchased offered coverage for medical emergencies and weather-related disruptions, but did not extend to voluntary cancellation decisions. More importantly, I discovered that as the primary cardholder responsible for the charges, I retained certain rights regarding the bookings that had been made, without my explicit authorization. While my family members were listed as the travelers, my financial responsibility for the expenses provided legal standing to modify or cancel the arrangements under specific circumstances. The strategic approach I developed involved multiple phases designed to maximize both the educational impact and the likelihood of achieving sustainable changes in family dynamics. The first phase would focus on establishing clear boundaries regarding the current vacation booking. The second phase would address the broader patterns of financial exploitation through systematic changes in my approach to family financial assistance. The third phase would involve ongoing reinforcement of new standards for respectful treatment and reciprocal relationships. I spent considerable time crafting communications that would be clear, professional, and unambiguous regarding my expectations and intentions. The tone needed to be firm without being unnecessarily harsh, direct without being cruel. The objective was to demonstrate serious consequences for unacceptable behavior while maintaining the possibility of improved relationships based on mutual respect and consideration. The first communication would be directed to my mother as the primary organizer of the vacation and the person whose casual text message had revealed their presumptuous attitude toward my financial contributions. The message needed to address both the immediate booking situation and the underlying relationship issues that had made such behavior seem acceptable to them. I drafted multiple versions of this crucial communication, refining the language to ensure maximum clarity and impact. The final version addressed the unauthorized use of my credit card information, the exclusion from family vacation planning, the pattern of taking my financial contributions for granted, and the changes in my approach to family financial assistance that would result from this incident. The message began by acknowledging the travel bookings that had been made using my credit card and noting my surprise at discovering these arrangements through banking notifications rather than family communication. I explained that while I had previously been willing to provide financial support for various family needs and activities, the casual presumption that I would fund elaborate vacations without being included in the planning or the experience represented a fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate family relationships. I outlined my decision to cancel the current vacation bookings as a necessary demonstration that financial support required mutual respect and consideration. The cancellation would proceed immediately to minimize the financial penalties involved, and any recovered funds would be applied to reduce the outstanding balances from previous financial assistance I had provided to various family members. The communication continued by establishing new policies for any future family financial assistance. All requests would need to be presented formally with detailed justification, specific repayment terms, and clear timelines for resolution. Financial support would be contingent upon demonstrated efforts at self-reliance and would not be available for discretionary spending or luxury experiences that exceeded the recipient's natural financial capabilities. Most importantly, any future family activities that involved my financial participation would require my inclusion in both the planning process and the actual experience. I would no longer provide funding for events, trips, or activities from which I was excluded, regardless of the justification offered by other family members. I sent this message to my mother with copies to all family members who had been included in the vacation planning, ensuring that everyone understood both the immediate consequences of their behavior and the long-term changes in my approach to family relationships. The timing was carefully calculated to allow for discussion and potential resolution, while maintaining sufficient lead time to minimize financial losses from the cancellation process. The immediate response exceeded my expectations, in both volume and intensity. My phone began ringing within minutes of sending the message, and text messages arrived in rapid succession from multiple family members expressing various combinations of shock, anger, pleading, and attempted justification for their behavior. My mother called first, her voice combining disbelief with indignation as she struggled to understand how I could ruin the family vacation over what she characterized as a simple miscommunication. She insisted that my exclusion from the travel plans had been an oversight rather than a deliberate decision, and that they had naturally assumed I would be too busy with work commitments to participate in a 2-week vacation. This explanation revealed the depth of their fundamental misunderstanding about the situation. They had convinced themselves that excluding me from the family vacation was actually considerate behavior, sparing me from activities they assumed I would not enjoy or have time to pursue. The fact that they had never bothered to ask about my preferences or availability demonstrated how little consideration they had given to my perspective throughout the planning process. I responded to my mother's call with calm professionalism, acknowledging her explanation while pointing out the logical inconsistencies in her reasoning. If they had truly believed I would be too busy to participate in the vacation, it would have been appropriate to discuss this assumption with me before using my financial resources to fund the experience. If they had genuinely intended to include me in the planning process, they could have initiated those conversations at any point during the months of preparation they had described. The conversation revealed additional details about their planning process that made their exclusion of me even more pointed. They had held multiple family meetings to coordinate schedules, compare resort options, and finalize activity preferences. They had created group chats and shared documents to manage the complex logistics of organizing travel for 8 people. They had invested considerable time and effort in ensuring that everyone's preferences and requirements were accommodated in the final arrangements. Everyone except me, despite the fact that my financial contribution was making the entire experience possible. My brother Marcus called next, adopting a more aggressive approach that revealed his frustration with the disruption of their carefully planned vacation. He argued that I was being unreasonable and selfish, pointing out that the vacation would create wonderful memories for the children and provide much-needed family bonding time for everyone. He suggested that my business success created an obligation to support family happiness and that canceling the vacation would damage relationships permanently. This conversation illuminated the psychological frameworks my family members had developed to justify their exploitative behavior. They had convinced themselves that my financial resources created moral obligations that superseded normal relationship boundaries. My success was viewed as a family asset rather than a personal achievement, and my reluctance to fund their preferences was characterized as selfishness rather than reasonable boundary setting. I explained to Marcus that family bonding experiences were indeed valuable and important, but that authentic family relationships required mutual consideration and respect rather than one-sided financial obligation. If family togetherness was truly their priority, they could easily modify their travel plans to include me in both the planning and the experience. If luxury accommodations and elaborate activities were more important than my participation, they were welcome to fund those preferences through their own resources. My sister Rebecca adopted a different strategy during her call, focusing on emotional manipulation rather than logical argument. She emphasized the disappointment the children would experience if the vacation were cancelled and suggested that I was prioritizing my hurt feelings over the happiness of innocent family members who had no involvement in the planning decisions. This approach revealed another sophisticated psychological tactic my family had developed for obtaining my financial support while avoiding accountability for their behavior. By focusing attention on the impact of my boundaries on third parties, particularly children, they attempted to make me responsible for consequences that actually resulted from their own inappropriate actions. I responded to Rebecca by noting that the children's disappointment was indeed unfortunate, but that it resulted directly from the adults' decision to make commitments using resources that did not belong to them. The situation provided an excellent opportunity to teach the children important lessons about the relationship between financial responsibility and decision-making authority, and about the importance of treating family members with consideration and respect. My younger brother David attempted a more conciliatory approach, acknowledging that the situation had been handled poorly while requesting an opportunity to find a compromise solution that would allow the vacation to proceed with modifications to address my concerns. He suggested that they could adjust the accommodations to include space for me, modify the activity schedules to reflect my preferences, and establish clearer communication protocols for future family planning. This response represented the most promising avenue for potential resolution, as it demonstrated some recognition of the inappropriate nature of their original approach, while expressing willingness to make substantive changes to address the underlying issues. However, the timing of his conciliatory offer also revealed its primarily self-interested motivation. Their willingness to consider including me in their plans had emerged only after I had demonstrated serious consequences for their exclusionary behavior. I explained to David that while I appreciated his recognition of the problems with their approach, the fundamental issue was not logistical arrangements, but relationship dynamics. The vacation booking had revealed systematic patterns of taking my financial contributions for granted while excluding me from decision-making processes and family experiences. Addressing these deeper issues would require more comprehensive changes than simply adding another room to their resort reservation. The series of phone calls continued throughout the day, with various combinations of family members attempting different persuasion strategies. Some focused on the financial waste that would result from cancellation penalties. Others emphasized the logistical difficulties of coordinating alternative plans for such a large group. Several attempted to minimize the significance of my exclusion by characterizing it as a miscommunication rather than a deliberate decision. None of these conversations addressed the fundamental relationship issues that had made their behavior seem acceptable in the first place. Their focus remained primarily on preserving their vacation plans, rather than understanding why their approach had been inappropriate or committing to meaningful changes in their treatment of me as a family member. The pattern of responses confirmed that my decision to implement consequences was both necessary and appropriate. Their resistance to acknowledging the legitimacy of my concerns demonstrated that discussion alone would be insufficient to achieve the relationship changes required. For healthier family dynamics, only through experiencing meaningful consequences for their exploitative behavior would they develop genuine motivation to treat me with the consideration and respect that should characterize healthy family relationships. By evening, I had completed the necessary steps to cancel their vacation bookings, working with the travel agency and credit card company to minimize the financial penalties, while ensuring that my family members understood the direct connection between their behavior and the consequences they were experiencing. The process was complex and time-consuming, but it sent an unmistakable message about my expectations for future treatment and my willingness to enforce appropriate boundaries. The transformation had begun, and there would be no returning to the previous patterns of exploitation disguised as family obligation. The 48 hours following the vacation cancellation revealed the true depth of my family's dependency on my financial resources and their profound resistance to accepting accountability for their exploitative behavior. The intensity of their responses confirmed that my decision to implement consequences had disrupted established patterns they had assumed were permanent and unchangeable. The first wave of resistance came through coordinated pressure tactics that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of my emotional vulnerabilities and psychological triggers. My family had clearly discussed strategy among themselves, developing approaches designed to maximize guilt, minimize their accountability, and restore their access to my financial resources without addressing the underlying relationship issues that had necessitated my boundary-setting actions. My mother initiated the most comprehensive assault on my resolve through a carefully orchestrated campaign involving multiple family members, extended relatives, and family friends who had been recruited to advocate for reversing the vacation cancellation. The coordination required for this effort revealed the substantial time and energy they were willing to invest in maintaining their privileged access to my resources while avoiding the behavioral changes that would justify restored trust and support. The psychological sophistication of their approach was remarkable in its calculated manipulation of family dynamics and emotional bonds. They had identified every potential point of leverage that could be used to pressure me into abandoning my newly established boundaries and returning to the previous pattern of unconditional financial support without corresponding respect or consideration. My Aunt Catherine called early on the second day, expressing deep concern about the family conflict and suggesting that my reaction to the vacation situation was disproportionate to the offense involved. She characterized the exclusion from travel plans as a simple oversight that had been blown out of proportion by business stress and professional pressure that had made me overly sensitive to family interactions. This conversation revealed the narrative framework my family had developed to explain my behavior to external observers while avoiding acknowledgement of their own inappropriate actions. According to their version of events, I had become unreasonably demanding and emotionally unstable due to work pressures, and my response to their innocent planning oversight represented a concerning change in personality that required intervention from concerned relatives. The strategy was particularly insidious because it reframed the entire situation to position me as the problem requiring correction rather than as the victim of exploitation who had finally developed appropriate boundaries. They had successfully convinced extended family members that my newly assertive behavior represented a character flaw rather than a healthy response to years of manipulative treatment. I responded to my aunt's concerns with factual information about the financial history of my family relationships, including specific examples of the pattern of increasing dependency and diminishing appreciation that had characterized their behavior. Over recent years, the vacation booking represented the culmination of this trend rather than an isolated incident, and my response was proportionate to the systematic nature of their exploitative behavior. My cousin Jennifer contacted me later that same day with a different approach that focused on family loyalty and the importance of maintaining relationships despite occasional misunderstandings. She emphasized the permanent damage that could result from allowing a vacation dispute to create lasting rifts in family bonds that had been strong for decades. This conversation illuminated another psychological tactic being employed by my family members to avoid accountability while pressuring me to abandon my boundaries. They were characterizing the situation as a mutual misunderstanding rather than acknowledging the unilateral exploitation that had occurred. They were framing my response as equally problematic to their behavior, creating false equivalence that minimized their responsibility while maximizing my obligation to restore harmony through capitulation. I explained to Jennifer that maintaining family relationships was indeed important to me, but that healthy relationships required mutual respect and consideration rather than one-sided accommodation of exploitative behavior. The damage to family bonds had occurred when my relatives decided to use my financial resources without including me in their decision-making processes. My response was an attempt to restore balance and respect, rather than create additional problems. The pressure campaign escalated significantly when my father became involved, adopting an authoritative approach that attempted to leverage traditional family hierarchy to compel my compliance with their preferences. He scheduled a phone call that he characterized as necessary family business requiring immediate resolution, and approached the conversation with the expectation that parental authority would override my financial autonomy and boundary setting efforts. His opening statement revealed the fundamental assumptions underlying my family's approach to the situation. He expressed disappointment in my selfishness and lack of family loyalty, noting that successful family members had obligations to support the happiness and well-being of relatives who had been less fortunate in their career development. He characterized my business success as partially due to family support during my early career development, creating obligations for ongoing financial contribution to family activities and needs. This conversation exposed the most problematic aspect of my family's psychological framework regarding my financial resources. They had convinced themselves that my business success was somehow partially their achievement, justifying their claims on my income and assets. They had developed elaborate justifications for their entitlement that transformed my generosity from a gift into an obligation, and my boundaries from reasonable self-protection into family betrayal. I responded to my father's authoritative approach with calm professionalism, acknowledging his concerns while clearly outlining the facts that had necessitated my boundary-setting actions. I detailed the financial analysis I had completed, demonstrating the systematic pattern of increasing dependency that had characterized their behavior over recent years. I explained the business principles that governed sustainable relationships, emphasizing the importance of reciprocity and mutual consideration for long-term relationship health. Most importantly, I addressed his assertion that family support during my early career had created ongoing obligations for financial contribution to their preferred activities. I acknowledged the various forms of support I had received from family members during different periods of my life, while noting that healthy family relationships involved mutual assistance based on ability and need, rather than one-sided obligation based on relative financial success. The conversation with my father revealed the depth of their resistance to accepting responsibility for their exploitative behavior. Even when presented with comprehensive evidence of their systematic manipulation and financial exploitation, he continued to insist that I was overreacting to minor oversights and creating unnecessary family conflict through unreasonable demands for inclusion and consideration. His inability to recognize the legitimacy of my concerns confirmed that the consequences I had implemented were both necessary and appropriate. Discussion and explanation alone would be insufficient to achieve the behavioral changes required for healthy family relationships. Only through experiencing meaningful consequences for their actions would they develop genuine understanding of appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. The second day brought additional pressure through my siblings, who had apparently coordinated their approaches to maximize emotional impact while presenting a unified front regarding their interpretation of events. Each conversation revealed different aspects of their strategic response to my boundary-setting actions, but all shared common elements designed to restore their access to my financial resources without acknowledging their inappropriate behavior. My brother Marcus adopted an aggressive, confrontational approach that revealed his frustration with the disruption of his vacation plans and his resentment regarding the financial dependency that my boundaries had exposed. He accused me of using money as a weapon to control family relationships and suggested that my business success had corrupted my values and damaged my ability to maintain healthy family connections. His accusations were particularly revealing because they demonstrated the psychological defenses he had developed to avoid acknowledging his financial dependency while maintaining his self-image as an independent adult. Rather than recognizing that his inability to fund family vacations without my assistance indicated his own financial limitations, he characterized my unwillingness to provide unlimited funding as controlling behavior. I responded to Marcus by noting that financial resources naturally provide decision-making authority regarding how those resources are utilized. My expectation of inclusion in planning processes for activities I was funding represented normal accountability rather than controlling behavior. His characterization of reasonable boundaries as manipulation revealed his own discomfort with the dependency relationship he had developed rather than any inappropriate behavior on my part. My sister Rebecca employed emotional manipulation tactics that focused on the impact of my decisions on innocent family members, particularly the children who would be disappointed by the vacation cancellation. She described elaborate conversations with her children about the anticipated vacation activities and expressed concern about explaining the cancellation in ways that would not damage their relationships with me. This approach represented sophisticated, psychological manipulation designed to make me responsible for consequences that actually resulted from her own poor decision-making. She was attempting to transfer responsibility for her children's disappointment from her decision to make commitments using resources that did not belong to her to my decision to enforce appropriate boundaries regarding my financial assets. I explained to Rebecca that the situation provided an excellent opportunity to teach her children important lessons about the relationship between financial responsibility and decision-making authority. The disappointment they were experiencing resulted directly from adult family members making commitments that exceeded their financial capabilities, and the resolution would demonstrate the importance of living within one's means and treating others with consideration and respect. My younger brother David continued his more conciliatory approach, acknowledging problems with their original planning process while requesting opportunities to develop compromise solutions that would address my concerns without completely eliminating the vacation experience. He suggested various modifications to the original plans that would include accommodations for my participation while maintaining the essential elements of the family gathering they had envisioned. While David's approach was more respectful than the confrontational tactics employed by other family members, it still failed to address the fundamental relationship issues that had made their behavior seem acceptable in the first place. His focus remained primarily on preserving their vacation plans, rather than demonstrating genuine understanding of the boundary violations that had necessitated my response. I acknowledged David's more respectful approach while explaining that the vacation cancellation was necessary to establish clear consequences for unacceptable behavior. Any future family activities involving my financial participation would need to be planned from the beginning with my full inclusion and input, rather than attempting to modify existing plans that had been developed without appropriate consideration. for my preferences and requirements. The resistance campaign reached its peak when several family members coordinated a group intervention that was presented as a family meeting, but functioned as an organized pressure session designed to overwhelm my resolve through sheer volume of emotional manipulation and guilt-inducing arguments. The meeting was scheduled without my input and presented as non-negotiable family business that required my attendance and cooperation. The intervention revealed the extraordinary lengths my family was willing to pursue to maintain their access to my financial resources without accepting accountability for their exploitative behavior. They had invested substantial time and emotional energy in developing coordinated arguments, recruiting external support, and organizing pressure tactics rather than simply acknowledging their inappropriate behavior and committing to respectful treatment in future interactions. The meeting began with prepared statements from each family member outlining their perspective on the situation and their requests for resolution. The consistency of their messaging revealed significant coordination and preparation, but their arguments remained fundamentally flawed because they continued to avoid acknowledging the legitimate nature of my concerns while demanding restoration of their preferred arrangements. I listened respectfully to their presentations while taking detailed notes about their arguments and proposals. When they had completed their prepared remarks, I responded with a comprehensive summary of the factual evidence that had led to my boundary-setting decisions, including the financial analysis documenting their systematic exploitation and the communication patterns that had revealed their casual disregard for my preferences and feelings. The group intervention ultimately strengthened my resolve rather than weakening it, because it demonstrated the extraordinary effort they were willing to invest in maintaining exploitative relationship patterns rather than simply treating me with appropriate consideration and respect. Their coordinated resistance to accepting accountability confirmed that consequences were necessary to achieve the behavioral changes required for healthy family relationships. By the end of the intervention, I had made my position unmistakably clear. The vacation cancellation would stand as a demonstration of the consequences for excluding me from family activities while expecting me to fund them. Any future financial assistance would be contingent upon demonstrated respect, appropriate inclusion in decision-making processes, and accountability for the impact of their requests on my financial planning and personal well-being. The transformation of my family relationships had begun in earnest, and their resistance to accepting the new boundaries only confirmed the necessity of the changes I was implementing. The week following the coordinated family intervention marked a critical period in establishing the permanence of my newly implemented boundaries. The intensity of their resistance had subsided into a more calculated campaign of intermittent pressure designed to test my resolve over time. This shift in tactics revealed their recognition that direct confrontation had proven ineffective, necessitating a more subtle approach aimed at gradually eroding my commitment to the standards I had established. The psychological warfare evolved into a pattern of seemingly casual interactions that contained embedded messages about family loyalty, shared history, and the potential consequences of maintaining my current position. These communications were carefully crafted to appear supportive, while actually functioning as continued attempts to manipulate my emotions and decision-making processes. My mother initiated this new phase through a series of phone calls that ostensibly focused on unrelated family news, but consistently included references to the strain my decisions were placing on family relationships. She would begin conversations with updates about grandchildren's activities or neighborhood developments, then gradually introduce comments about how difficult the current situation had become for everyone involved. During one such conversation, she mentioned that my nephew had been asking when we would all take a family vacation together, noting that the children were confused about why plans had changed so suddenly. She described conversations with my sister-in-law about explaining the situation to the children in age-appropriate ways that would not damage their perception of family unity and cooperation. This approach represented a sophisticated evolution of their manipulation tactics, moving from direct pressure to environmental pressure designed to make me feel responsible for broader family dysfunction. Rather than acknowledging their role in creating the current situation through their exploitative behavior, they were positioning my boundary-setting actions as the primary source of family disruption. I responded to these indirect manipulation attempts with consistent clarity about the actual sequence of events that had led to the current situation. When my mother expressed concern about explaining the vacation cancellation to confused grandchildren, I noted that the confusion resulted from adults making commitments, using financial resources that did not belong to them. The educational opportunity. For the children involved, learning about the relationship between decision-making authority and financial responsibility. The consistency of my responses to these subtle manipulation attempts gradually communicated that I would not be swayed by guilt tactics or emotional manipulation. My family began to recognize that their previous methods for obtaining compliance were no longer effective, necessitating either genuine behavioral change or acceptance of the new relationship dynamics I had established. During this period, I invested significant energy in developing support systems that would reinforce my commitment to healthy boundaries while providing perspective on the transformation I was implementing. The isolation that results from establishing boundaries with manipulative family members can be substantial, making external support crucial for maintaining resolve during difficult periods. I sought guidance from a business mentor who had navigated similar challenges with family members who attempted to exploit professional success for personal benefit. Her perspective proved invaluable in validating my approach while providing practical strategies for maintaining firm boundaries without compromising my emotional well-being or professional effectiveness. The conversation revealed that exploitation by family members of successful individuals was remarkably common, often following predictable patterns that escalated over time if left unchecked. My mentor shared her own experience of implementing boundaries with relatives who had developed expectations of financial support that exceeded reasonable limits and had begun affecting her business decisions and personal financial security. Her validation of my approach was particularly meaningful because it came from someone who understood both the business principles involved and the emotional complexity of family relationships. She confirmed that my decision to implement consequences for exploitative behavior was not only appropriate, but necessary for establishing sustainable family relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. I also connected with a professional counselor who specialized in family dynamics and boundary-setting strategies. These sessions provided valuable insight into the psychological mechanisms that had enabled my family's exploitative behavior while helping me develop more effective communication strategies for future interactions. The counseling process revealed that my family had successfully exploited my desire for approval and connection to extract financial resources while providing minimal reciprocal emotional support. They had learned to leverage my positive qualities against me, using my generosity and family loyalty as tools for manipulation rather than foundations for healthy relationships. Understanding these psychological dynamics helped me recognize that my family's resistance to accepting boundaries was predictable rather than surprising. People who benefit from exploitative relationships naturally resist changes that would require them to provide reciprocal value or develop greater self-reliance. Their opposition to my boundary-setting efforts reflected the effectiveness of my approach rather than indicating problems with my decisions. The counseling sessions also provided strategies for managing the emotional challenges associated with family conflict while maintaining focus on long-term relationship goals. The temporary discomfort of establishing boundaries was necessary to create space for healthier relationship patterns to develop. But the process required sustained commitment, despite ongoing pressure to return to previous dysfunctional dynamics. Meanwhile, my professional life continued to flourish during this period of family transition. The clarity and decisiveness I was developing through personal boundary setting translated into enhanced leadership capabilities and more effective business decision-making. The skills required for managing manipulative family members proved directly applicable to challenging professional situations involving clients, vendors, or employees who attempted to exploit professional relationships for inappropriate personal gain. My marketing agency secured several significant new clients during this period, partly due to the increased confidence and assertiveness that resulted from successfully managing difficult family dynamics. Business relationships improved when I applied the same standards for mutual respect and reciprocal value that I was implementing in personal relationships. The professional success provided additional validation of my approach while demonstrating that prioritizing self-respect and appropriate boundaries enhanced rather than diminished my effectiveness in various areas of life. The fear that establishing firm boundaries would damage important relationships proved unfounded, as healthy relationships actually strengthened when based on mutual consideration rather than one-sided accommodation. 3 weeks after the vacation cancellation, my youngest brother, David, made a significant overture that suggested genuine recognition of the problems with their previous approach. He requested a private meeting to discuss the situation without other family members present, acknowledging that the group dynamics had prevented honest conversation about the underlying issues that needed to be addressed. The meeting took place at a neutral location, and David approached the conversation with apparent sincerity about understanding my perspective and exploring possibilities for improved family relationships. He began by acknowledging that their approach to the vacation planning had been inappropriate and that my exclusion from the decision-making process had been disrespectful given my financial contribution to the experience. This acknowledgement represented the first genuine acceptance of responsibility I had received from any family member since implementing my boundaries. Rather than attempting to minimize their behavior or shift blame to external circumstances, David explicitly recognized that their actions had violated reasonable expectations for respectful treatment and family inclusion. He continued by expressing regret about the pattern of taking my financial contributions for granted while failing to provide appropriate recognition or appreciation for the sacrifices involved. He acknowledged that their requests for assistance had become increasingly presumptuous over time, and that they had failed to consider the impact of their expectations on my financial planning and personal goals. Most significantly, David proposed a comprehensive approach to rebuilding trust and establishing healthier family relationships based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. His proposals included specific changes in communication patterns, decision-making processes, and financial interactions that would address the fundamental issues that had necessitated my boundary-setting actions. The conversation represented a meaningful breakthrough in family dynamics, suggesting that at least one family member was capable of genuine reflection and behavioral change. David's approach demonstrated understanding that restored relationships would require sustained effort and consistent demonstration of respectful behavior, rather than simple apologies or temporary accommodation. However, I remained cautious about interpreting this single conversation as evidence of broader family transformation. One family member's recognition of problems did not necessarily indicate that others were prepared to make similar acknowledgements or behavioral changes. The established patterns of exploitation and manipulation had developed over many years and would require sustained effort to modify permanently. I responded to David's overture with appreciation for his willingness to engage in honest conversation while maintaining clarity about the standards that would govern future family interactions. Any restoration of financial assistance or family activities would need to be based on demonstrated behavioral change rather than verbal commitments alone. The conversation with David provided hope that genuine family healing was possible while reinforcing the importance of maintaining firm boundaries until consistent, respectful behavior had been established. His approach suggested that consequences had been effective in motivating at least some family members to engage in serious reflection about their behavior and its impact on family relationships. During the same period, I began developing alternative approaches to family connection that would allow for positive relationships without compromising the boundaries I had established. These included individual relationships with family members who demonstrated respectful behavior, selective participation in family activities that did not involve financial exploitation, and new traditions that emphasized mutual contribution rather than one-sided support. The goal was not to punish family members indefinitely, but to create space for healthier relationship patterns to develop. Some family members might prove capable of genuine change and would earn restored trust through consistent, respectful behavior. Others might continue patterns of manipulation and would need to be managed through maintained boundaries and limited contact. The transformation process had revealed both the necessity of boundaries and the possibility of improved relationships based on mutual respect and consideration. The initial pain of family conflict was gradually being replaced by the satisfaction of authentic connections with family members who were willing to treat me with appropriate dignity and appreciation. The vacation cancellation had served its intended purpose as a clear demonstration of consequences for exploitative behavior. The ongoing process of boundary maintenance was teaching family members that respectful treatment was required rather than optional, and that my resources were not available for activities that excluded me from meaningful participation. Most importantly, the experience was demonstrating that self-respect and appropriate boundaries enhanced rather than diminished the quality of family relationships. The temporary discomfort of conflict was creating space for more authentic connections based on genuine mutual appreciation rather than manipulative dependency patterns. The journey toward healthier family relationships was proving both challenging and rewarding, requiring sustained commitment while offering the possibility of deeper connections based on mutual respect and genuine consideration for each other's well-being and dignity. The transformation in my family dynamics began to produce unexpected consequences that extended far beyond the immediate vacation cancellation and boundary establishment. 6 weeks after implementing my new standards for respectful treatment, the ripple effects of my decisions were creating fundamental shifts in how various family members approached their relationships with me and with each other. The most significant development emerged through my professional network, where word of my decisive handling of family exploitation had begun to circulate among business associates who faced similar challenges with relatives who attempted to leverage their success for personal benefit. The story of my boundary-setting actions had apparently resonated with other entrepreneurs and executives who recognized the familiar patterns of family manipulation and financial exploitation. My business mentor arranged an introduction to a private networking group composed of successful professionals who had navigated complex family dynamics while building significant business enterprises. The group met monthly to discuss challenges related to maintaining family relationships while protecting professional assets and personal boundaries from relatives who viewed their success as community property available for unlimited access. The first meeting I attended proved remarkably validating and educational. The experiences shared by other members revealed that exploitation by family members was not only common among successful individuals, but often followed predictable patterns that escalated over time if left unchecked. My situation was neither unique nor extreme compared to the challenges faced by other group members. One member described a situation where her parents had used her credit information to purchase a luxury automobile without her knowledge, justifying their actions by noting that she could easily afford the payments given her business income. Another member had discovered that his siblings had been telling mutual acquaintances that he would personally guarantee their business ventures, creating expectations and obligations he had never agreed to accept. The group provided a forum for discussing practical strategies for managing family financial boundaries while maintaining appropriate emotional connections. Members shared successful approaches for establishing clear policies regarding financial assistance, methods for communicating boundaries effectively, and techniques for managing the guilt and emotional manipulation that typically accompanied boundary-setting efforts. Most importantly, the group validated that protecting personal resources and demanding respectful treatment from family members was not selfish behavior, but necessary self-preservation that ultimately benefited family relationships by establishing sustainable foundations for long-term connection and mutual respect. During this period, my professional reputation began to benefit significantly from the increased confidence and assertiveness that resulted from successfully managing challenging family dynamics. The skills required for establishing firm boundaries with manipulative relatives proved directly applicable to complex business negotiations and difficult client management situations. My marketing agency secured a major contract with a Fortune 500 company that had previously been reluctant to work with smaller firms due to concerns about our ability to maintain professional standards under pressure. The decisive leadership I demonstrated during the contract negotiation process reflected the clarity and confidence I had developed through personal boundary setting experiences. The client relationship proved particularly rewarding because it allowed me to demonstrate expertise in managing complex stakeholder dynamics, a skill set that had been substantially enhanced through navigating family manipulation tactics. The ability to remain calm and focused while managing competing interests and emotional pressure translated directly into professional capabilities that distinguished my services from competitors. The business success provided additional validation that prioritizing self-respect and appropriate boundaries enhanced rather than compromised my effectiveness in various areas of life. The fear that establishing firm standards would damage important relationships proved unfounded, as professional relationships actually improved when based on mutual respect and clear expectations. Meanwhile, the dynamics within my family continued to evolve as individual members began to recognize that the previous patterns of exploitation were no longer sustainable. The consistency of my boundary maintenance over several weeks had communicated that the changes I had implemented were permanent rather than temporary expressions of frustration that could be outlasted through persistent pressure. My sister Rebecca, made the next significant overture toward rebuilt relationships, requesting a lunch meeting to discuss the situation without the complexity of other family members' involvement. Her approach was notably different from the manipulative tactics she had employed during the immediate aftermath of the vacation cancellation, suggesting genuine reflection about the dynamics that had led to the current situation. The conversation began with Rebecca acknowledging that she had been uncomfortable with their approach to the vacation planning, even during the initial stages, but had failed to advocate for including me in the decision-making process due to assumptions about my availability and interest in family activities. She expressed regret about allowing convenience and presumption to override consideration for my feelings and preferences. This acknowledgement represented significant progress in her understanding of the fundamental issues that had necessitated my boundary-setting actions. Rather than characterizing my response as overreaction to minor oversights, she recognized that their behavior had reflected systematic disregard for my perspective and feelings that had accumulated over time. Rebecca continued by expressing genuine appreciation for the financial support I had provided to her family over the years, particularly during her husband's medical crisis when my assistance had prevented serious financial hardship. She acknowledged that their gratitude had become perfunctory over time and that they had begun treating my generosity as expected rather than appreciated. Most significantly, she proposed specific changes in communication patterns and decision-making processes that would address the fundamental relationship issues that had created the current situation. Her proposals included advanced consultation for any family activities involving financial coordination, explicit inclusion of my preferences in planning processes, and regular acknowledgement of the contributions I made to family well-being. The conversation with Rebecca provided additional evidence that consequences had been effective in motivating genuine reflection and behavioral change among family members who were capable of recognizing the legitimacy of my concerns. Her approach demonstrated understanding that restored relationships would require sustained effort rather than simple apologies or temporary accommodation. However, I maintained appropriate caution about interpreting individual conversations as evidence of comprehensive family transformation. The patterns of exploitation and manipulation had developed over many years and would require consistent demonstration of respectful behavior before trust could be fully restored. I responded to Rebecca's overture with appreciation for her willingness to engage in honest conversation while emphasizing that future family interactions would need to be based on demonstrated behavioral change rather than verbal commitments alone. Any restoration of financial assistance or participation in family activities would require evidence of sustained, respectful treatment. The conversation provided hope for eventual family healing while reinforcing the importance of maintaining firm boundaries until consistent, respectful behavior had been established across all family relationships. Rebecca's approach suggested that at least some family members were capable of genuine change when faced with clear consequences for exploitative behavior. During the same period, I began receiving indirect feedback about the impact of my boundary setting. Actions on family dynamics beyond my direct relationships. Extended family members who had previously remained neutral or uninformed about the financial exploitation began to understand the legitimate reasons for my response to the vacation situation. My cousin Jennifer, who had initially advocated for family harmony and compromise, contacted me to acknowledge that she had not understood the full scope of the financial dependency that had developed over time. After conversations with other family members about the situation, she had gained appreciation for the pattern of exploitation that had necessitated my decisive response. This shift in perception among extended family members was particularly significant because it indicated that my family's narrative about my unreasonable behavior was not gaining traction among objective observers who understood the full context of the situation. The facts were sufficiently clear that neutral parties recognized the appropriateness of my boundary-setting actions. The change in extended family dynamics also reduced the effectiveness of my immediate family's attempts to recruit external pressure for reversing my decisions. When extended relatives understood the legitimate basis for my actions, they were no longer willing to advocate for restored access to my resources without corresponding accountability for respectful treatment. 8 weeks after the vacation cancellation, my mother made her first direct acknowledgement that their approach to family financial coordination had been problematic, and that changes would be necessary to restore healthy relationships. The conversation occurred during what she characterized as a family crisis meeting, but her tone was notably different from the authoritative demands and emotional manipulation that had characterized her previous communications. She began by expressing regret about the way the vacation situation had been handled, acknowledging that my exclusion from planning processes had been inappropriate given my financial contribution to the experience. She recognized that their presumption about my willingness to fund activities I was not invited to participate in had reflected fundamental misunderstanding about appropriate family dynamics. Most importantly, she accepted responsibility for enabling the pattern of financial dependency that had developed among family members over time. She acknowledged that her role in coordinating requests for assistance from various relatives had created systematic exploitation that had taken advantage of my generosity while failing to provide appropriate appreciation or reciprocal support. The conversation represented the most significant breakthrough in family dynamics since implementing my boundaries. My mother's acknowledgement of responsibility provided validation that the consequences I had implemented were both necessary and effective in motivating genuine reflection about problematic relationship patterns. However, the acknowledgement also revealed the extent to which she had been instrumental in orchestrating the financial exploitation that had characterized family relationships for many years. Her role as coordinator and facilitator of various requests for assistance had enabled the systematic pattern of dependency that had culminated in the vacation booking situation. This realization provided additional perspective on the family dynamics that had developed over time, while reinforcing the importance of maintaining firm boundaries until consistent, respectful behavior had been demonstrated by all family members, rather than just selected individuals. I responded to my mother's acknowledgement with appreciation for her recognition of the problems that had developed, while emphasizing that restored relationships would require sustained behavioral change rather than verbal commitments alone. The patterns of exploitation had been too systematic and long-standing to be resolved through conversation alone. The transformation process had revealed both the necessity of consequences for establishing respectful treatment and the possibility of genuine family healing when individuals were willing to acknowledge their role in creating problematic dynamics. The initial pain of conflict was gradually being replaced by the satisfaction of more authentic relationships based on mutual consideration rather than one-sided obligation. The vacation cancellation had served its intended purpose as a clear demonstration that respectful treatment was required rather than optional for accessing my financial resources and support. The ongoing boundary maintenance was teaching family members that sustainable relationships required reciprocal consideration and genuine appreciation rather than casual presumption and emotional manipulation. Most significantly, the experience was proving that self-respect and appropriate boundaries were essential foundations for healthy family relationships rather than obstacles to family connection. The temporary discomfort of establishing firm standards was creating space for more authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being and dignity. The 10-week mark following the vacation cancellation represented a crucial transition point in establishing permanent changes to family relationship dynamics. The initial crisis phase had concluded. Individual acknowledgements of responsibility had been offered by several family members, and the foundation for healthier interactions had been established through consistent boundary maintenance. The focus now shifted from defensive protection of personal resources to proactive implementation of standards that would govern future family engagement. The development of comprehensive policies for family financial interaction required careful consideration of multiple competing objectives. The primary goal remained the establishment of relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocal consideration rather than one-sided exploitation. However, these standards needed to be implemented in ways that preserved opportunities for genuine family connection while protecting against resumed patterns of manipulative behavior. I dedicated substantial time to developing written policies that would provide clear guidance for both my own decision-making processes and family members. Understanding of expectations for future interactions. The documentation served multiple purposes: establishing objective criteria for evaluating requests, providing transparency about decision-making processes, and creating accountability mechanisms that would prevent gradual erosion of established boundaries. The comprehensive policy framework addressed several distinct categories of family financial interaction, each with specific criteria and procedures designed to ensure appropriate respect and accountability. Emergency assistance remained available for genuine crises involving health, safety, or basic living requirements, but would require detailed documentation of circumstances and specific repayment plans with established timelines and enforcement mechanisms. Educational support for family members pursuing legitimate skill development or professional advancement would be considered on a case-by-case basis, contingent upon demonstrated commitment to the educational objectives and realistic plans for utilizing acquired knowledge in ways that would enhance long-term self-sufficiency rather than creating additional dependency. Business-related assistance for family members developing entrepreneurial ventures would require comprehensive business plans, market analysis, and specific milestones for measuring progress towards sustainable profitability. Such assistance would be structured as formal investments with documented terms and conditions rather than casual gifts or loans with ambiguous repayment expectations. Most significantly, any family activities involving coordination of financial resources would require full participation of all contributing parties in planning processes, with explicit inclusion of preferences and requirements from individuals. Providing financial support. No family member would be expected to fund experiences or activities from which they were excluded without specific agreement and justification. The implementation of these policies required systematic communication with family members to ensure understanding of new expectations and procedures. Rather than presenting the policies as punitive measures resulting from past conflicts, I framed them as professional standards that would enable more effective and sustainable family financial coordination while protecting all parties from misunderstanding and disappointment. The response to these policy implementations revealed the varying degrees of genuine commitment to behavioral change among different family members. Those who had engaged in authentic reflection about past patterns received the policies as reasonable frameworks for improved family interaction. Those who remained primarily focused on maintaining access to financial resources without corresponding accountability responded with resistance and continued attempts at manipulation. My brother Marcus initially attempted to characterize the written policies as unnecessarily formal and bureaucratic for family relationships, suggesting that such documentation indicated lack of trust and family loyalty. His resistance revealed continued unwillingness to accept accountability for past exploitative behavior, while maintaining expectations for future financial access without corresponding obligations for respectful treatment. I responded to Marcus by noting that the policies simply documented standards for mutual respect and consideration that should naturally characterize healthy family relationships. The need for written documentation had resulted from past patterns of misunderstanding and inappropriate presumption rather than indicating problems with current family dynamics. The conversation with Marcus provided additional insight into the psychological mechanisms he employed to avoid acknowledging his financial dependency while maintaining his self-image as an independent adult, contributing equally to family relationships. His resistance to accountability measures reflected discomfort with explicit recognition of the imbalanced nature of our financial interactions over recent years. In contrast, my sister Rebecca and brother David responded positively to the policy framework, recognizing it as evidence of my continued commitment to family relationships despite past difficulties. They viewed the established procedures as providing clear guidance for appropriate interaction while demonstrating that respectful behavior would be rewarded with continued openness to requests for assistance when legitimate needs arose. Rebecca specifically requested copies of the policy documentation for her own reference, expressing appreciation for the clarity and transparency the written standards provided. She noted that the explicit criteria would help her evaluate the appropriateness of potential requests before initiating conversations, reducing the likelihood of misunderstanding or inappropriate presumption. David proposed implementing similar documentation for his own financial planning processes, recognizing that clear policies and procedures could enhance rather than complicate family financial coordination. His suggestion indicated genuine understanding that accountability measures strengthen rather than weaken sustainable relationship foundations. The positive responses from Rebecca and David provided validation that family members capable of genuine reflection and behavioral change would embrace rather than resist reasonable standards for mutual respect and consideration. Their willingness to engage constructively with the policy framework suggested that restored trust and enhanced family relationships were achievable objectives rather than unrealistic expectations. During this implementation period, my professional development continued to benefit substantially from the enhanced leadership capabilities and strategic thinking skills that had developed through managing complex family dynamics. The systematic approach to relationship management and conflict resolution that I had applied to family challenges proved directly applicable to sophisticated business negotiations and client relationship development. My marketing agency secured another significant contract with a multinational corporation that specifically cited our demonstrated expertise in stakeholder management and complex project coordination as deciding factors in their vendor selection and process. The client relationship required navigation of multiple competing interests and sensitive political dynamics that closely paralleled the challenges I had addressed in family relationship transformation. The business success provided additional validation that prioritizing self-respect and implementing appropriate boundaries enhanced rather than compromised professional effectiveness. The confidence and assertiveness that resulted from successfully Managing manipulative behavior translated into more effective leadership and more successful business development activities. The professional recognition also provided economic independence that further strengthened my ability to maintain family boundaries without concerns about potential financial consequences. The diversification of income sources and expansion of client relationships reduced any theoretical vulnerability to family pressure tactics that might have attempted to leverage professional concerns against personal boundary-setting efforts. 3 months after the vacation cancellation, my mother initiated a comprehensive discussion about restructuring family financial coordination to address the systematic problems that had been identified through the recent conflicts. Her approach indicated genuine recognition that fundamental changes would be necessary to restore healthy family relationships rather than simply resolving the immediate vacation dispute. The conversation revealed that she had been conducting her own analysis of family financial patterns over recent years, apparently motivated by recognition that the exploitation I had documented was both systematic and unsustainable. Her research had confirmed the accuracy of my financial analysis while providing additional perspective on the gradual escalation of inappropriate expectations and casual presumption that had characterized family interactions. She acknowledged responsibility for her role in coordinating and facilitating requests for assistance that had created systematic dependency relationships rather than encouraging individual family members to develop greater self-reliance and financial independence. Her position as family financial coordinator had enabled patterns of exploitation that ultimately damaged relationships while creating unsustainable expectations for ongoing support. Most significantly, she proposed implementing family-wide policies for financial interaction that would establish consistent standards for all members rather than allowing continued informal arrangements that had proven vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. Her proposal included regular family meetings to discuss financial coordination openly, documented procedures for requesting assistance, and accountability measures that would ensure appropriate appreciation and reciprocal consideration. The conversation represented the most comprehensive acknowledgement of systemic problems and commitment to fundamental change that any family member had offered since the implementation of my boundaries. Her willingness to accept responsibility for enabling exploitative patterns while proposing structural solutions suggested genuine understanding of the relationship issues that had necessitated my decisive actions. However, I maintained appropriate caution about interpreting individual commitment to change as evidence of comprehensive family transformation. The patterns of manipulation and exploitation had involved multiple family members over many years and would require sustained behavioral change from all participants rather than policy adjustments coordinated by individual family members. I responded to my mother's proposals with appreciation for her recognition of systemic problems, while emphasizing that restored family relationships would require demonstrated behavioral change from all family members rather than structural modifications alone. The policies she proposed would be valuable additions to family coordination processes, but their effectiveness would depend upon genuine commitment to respectful treatment and mutual consideration from all participants. The comprehensive discussion with my mother provided substantial hope for eventual family healing, while reinforcing the importance of maintaining established boundaries until consistent respectful behavior had been demonstrated across all family relationships. Her proposals suggested that consequences had been effective in motivating recognition of fundamental problems and commitment to meaningful solutions. During the same period, I began developing expanded approaches to family connection that would allow for positive relationships while maintaining the protective boundaries that had proven necessary for respectful treatment. These approaches emphasized individual relationships with family members who demonstrated consistent respectful behavior, selective participation in family activities that reflected appropriate inclusion and consideration, and new traditions that emphasized mutual contribution rather than one-sided financial support. The goal remained the restoration of healthy family relationships based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation rather than continued isolation or permanent estrangement. However, such restoration would require sustained demonstration of behavioral change rather than verbal commitments or policy adjustments that were not accompanied by consistent, respectful treatment. The transformation process had revealed both the necessity of firm boundaries for establishing respectful treatment and the possibility of genuine family healing when individuals were willing to acknowledge their role in creating problematic dynamics and commit to sustained behavioral improvement. The initial pain of establishing consequences had created space for more authentic relationships based on mutual consideration and genuine appreciation for each other's contributions and well-being. The first significant test of my newly implemented family policies emerged 4 months after the vacation cancellation, when my brother David approached me with a request for business development assistance. His freelance consulting practice had reached a critical juncture where additional capital investment could enable expansion into more lucrative corporate contracts, but lack of resources was preventing him from pursuing these opportunities effectively. The timing of his request provided an ideal opportunity to evaluate whether the behavioral changes he had demonstrated during our previous conversations represented genuine transformation or strategic adaptation designed to restore access to financial resources. The manner in which he presented his request would reveal his understanding of the new standards I had established and his commitment to respectful interaction patterns. David's approach to the conversation demonstrated remarkable evolution in his understanding of appropriate family financial coordination. Rather than presenting his needs as urgent family emergencies requiring immediate assistance, he scheduled a formal meeting and prepared comprehensive documentation that addressed all the criteria outlined in my written policies for business-related support requests. He began the conversation by acknowledging the problems with previous family financial interactions and expressing appreciation for the clearer framework I had established for evaluating assistance requests. His recognition of past difficulties and acceptance of new accountability measures indicated genuine understanding that sustainable family relationships required mutual respect and transparent communication rather than casual presumption and emotional manipulation. The business proposal he presented reflected substantial preparation and professional-level analysis of market opportunities, financial projections, and risk management strategies. He had invested considerable time in developing a comprehensive business plan that demonstrated serious commitment to building sustainable entrepreneurial success rather than simply accessing additional funding for marginal business activities. His financial projections included detailed analysis of how the requested investment would generate specific returns within defined timeframes, providing clear metrics for evaluating the success of the venture and establishing accountability for the productive use of any resources provided. The documentation addressed potential risks and mitigation strategies while maintaining realistic expectations about market challenges and competitive pressures. Most significantly, David proposed structuring any assistance as a formal business investment with documented terms and conditions, rather than requesting a casual loan or gift that would create ambiguous obligations and expectations. His willingness to accept formal accountability measures demonstrated understanding that respectful treatment required reciprocal responsibility and transparent arrangements. The conversation provided compelling evidence that consequences had been effective in motivating genuine behavioral change among family members who were capable of recognizing the legitimacy of my concerns and adapting their approach accordingly. David's professional presentation and acceptance of accountability measures contrasted sharply with the casual presumption and emotional manipulation that had characterized previous family financial interactions. I responded to his request by expressing appreciation for his respectful approach and comprehensive preparation, while noting that the evaluation process would require time for thorough analysis of his business plan and market projections. The formal investment structure he proposed aligned with the standards I had established for business-related assistance, while providing appropriate protection for both parties. The evaluation period allowed for detailed analysis of his business concept, review of financial projections with independent business advisors, and assessment of his demonstrated commitment to the venture through his own resource investment and preparation efforts. The systematic approach to decision-making reinforced the principle that family financial assistance required the same level of due diligence and professional evaluation that would be applied to any significant business investment. After completing the evaluation process, I approved a structured investment in David's business expansion that included specific milestones for measuring progress, regular reporting requirements, and defined terms for return on investment. The arrangement provided him with the capital necessary to pursue expanded business opportunities while establishing clear accountability measures that would ensure productive use of the resources. The successful resolution of David's request demonstrated that the new framework for family financial coordination could support legitimate assistance while maintaining appropriate boundaries and accountability measures. Family members who approached requests with respect and transparency could access support for worthwhile objectives, while those who continued patterns of manipulation and exploitation would find their access restricted. The positive outcome also provided validation for David's genuine commitment to behavioral change and respectful interaction patterns. His willingness to accept formal business arrangements and accountability measures distinguished him from family members who continued to seek casual access to financial resources without corresponding responsibility or appreciation. During the same period, a contrasting situation emerged when my brother Marcus approached me with a request for assistance with what he characterized as an urgent family financial crisis. His approach to the conversation revealed continued reliance on emotional manipulation tactics and resistance to the accountability measures I had established for family financial coordination. Marcus presented his request as an emergency situation, requiring immediate assistance without the formal documentation and evaluation processes outlined in my written policies. He attempted to circumvent established procedures by emphasizing the urgency of his circumstances and suggesting that requiring formal processes would demonstrate lack of family loyalty and trust. His approach revealed continued misunderstanding of the fundamental relationship issues that had necessitated the implementation of clear boundaries and accountability measures. Rather than recognizing that respectful treatment required compliance with established procedures, he attempted to leverage emotional pressure and family obligations to obtain financial assistance without corresponding accountability. The conversation provided insight into the psychological mechanisms he continued to employ for avoiding recognition of his financial dependency while maintaining expectations for support that exceeded his willingness to provide reciprocal respect and consideration. His resistance to documentation requirements revealed discomfort with explicit acknowledgement of the assistance being requested and his inability to meet standard criteria for business or emergency support. I responded to Marcus by noting that the established policies applied to all family members regardless of the urgency they attributed to their circumstances. Emergency assistance remained available for genuine crises involving health, safety, or basic living requirements, but would require the same documentation and accountability measures that had been clearly communicated to all family members. His unwillingness to comply with reasonable procedures for requesting assistance resulted in the denial of his request, demonstrating that consequences for disrespectful behavior would be consistently applied regardless of emotional pressure or attempts at manipulation. The outcome reinforced the principle that respectful treatment was required rather than optional for accessing family financial support. The contrasting outcomes of David's successful request and Marcus's denied request provided clear evidence to all family members that behavioral change would be rewarded, while continued exploitation attempts would result in restricted access to assistance. The differential treatment based on demonstrated respect and accountability created incentives for improved behavior while protecting against resumed patterns of manipulation. 6 months after implementing my boundary-setting actions, my sister, Rebecca, initiated a conversation about organizing a family gathering that would provide opportunities for positive interaction while respecting the standards I had established for family financial coordination. Her approach to planning the event demonstrated understanding of the inclusion requirements and mutual consideration principles that governed my participation in family activities. Rebecca's proposal included comprehensive consultation about scheduling preferences, activity options, and financial arrangements that would ensure appropriate contribution from all participants rather than relying on one-sided funding from individual family members. Her emphasis on collaborative planning and shared responsibility indicated genuine commitment to the respectful interaction patterns that had been identified as necessary for healthy family relationships. The planning process revealed substantial evolution in family dynamics as multiple members contributed ideas, resources, and coordination efforts rather than expecting one person to manage all arrangements while funding the majority of expenses. The collaborative approach created more authentic engagement and investment from all participants while distributing both the benefits and the responsibilities of family activities more equitably. The event itself proved remarkably successful in demonstrating that family relationships based on mutual respect and shared responsibility could be more satisfying and sustainable than previous patterns based on one-sided financial support and casual exploitation. The genuine appreciation expressed by family members for the collaborative experience contrasted favorably with the perfunctory gratitude that had characterized previous family activities. The success of the family gathering provided evidence that the boundary-setting actions had created space for healthier relationship patterns to develop, rather than simply punishing past inappropriate behavior. Family members who were willing to engage respectfully and contribute appropriately could enjoy enhanced relationships, while those who continued exploitative patterns would find their access to family activities and support increasingly restricted. During this period, my professional development continued to benefit from the enhanced confidence and strategic thinking capabilities that had developed through successfully managing complex family dynamics. The systematic approach to relationship management and accountability implementation had strengthened my leadership skills and improved my effectiveness in managing sophisticated business relationships and negotiations. My marketing agency expanded its service offerings to include organizational development consulting leveraging the expertise I had developed in stakeholder management and conflict resolution through family relationship transformation. The new service line proved highly successful with corporate clients who faced similar challenges in managing competing interests and establishing accountability measures within complex organizational structures. The professional expansion provided additional validation that the skills developed through personal boundary-setting experiences had broad applicability and significant value in various contexts. The investment in establishing respectful treatment standards had generated returns that extended far beyond improved family relationships to encompass enhanced business capabilities and expanded market opportunities. The comprehensive transformation that had resulted from the vacation cancellation decision continued to produce positive outcomes across multiple areas of life, demonstrating that prioritizing self-respect and implementing appropriate boundaries created foundation for sustainable success and satisfaction in both personal and professional relationships. The initial discomfort of establishing consequences had enabled lasting improvements that would continue to generate benefits for years to come. The systematic transformation of my family relationships began to generate recognition within my broader professional and social networks as colleagues and business associates observed the enhanced confidence and strategic capabilities that had emerged from successfully managing complex personal dynamics. The skills developed through establishing and maintaining appropriate boundaries with manipulative family members proved remarkably applicable to sophisticated business challenges and leadership responsibilities. 7 months after implementing my boundary-setting framework, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference for women entrepreneurs about managing family expectations while building successful businesses. The conference organizers had learned about my experience through professional networking connections and recognized that the challenges I had navigated represented common obstacles faced by many successful women who struggled to maintain family relationships while protecting their professional assets and personal boundaries. The speaking engagement provided an opportunity to articulate the strategic principles and practical approaches that had proven effective in transforming exploitative family dynamics into respectful relationships based on mutual consideration and accountability. The presentation emphasized that establishing boundaries was not about rejecting family connections, but about creating sustainable foundations for healthy relationships that could withstand the pressures of differential financial success and professional achievement. The audience response exceeded all expectations, with numerous attendees approaching me after the presentation to share similar experiences and request additional guidance about implementing comparable strategies in their own family situations. The commonality of these challenges among successful women revealed that exploitation by family members was not an isolated phenomenon, but a predictable consequence of achieving financial independence while maintaining emotional connections with relatives who had not experienced similar success. The networking conversations that followed the presentation led to invitations to participate in additional speaking engagements and consulting opportunities focused on relationship management and boundary-setting strategies. The demand for expertise in this area demonstrated that many successful professionals struggled with similar challenges, but lacked frameworks for addressing family exploitation while preserving opportunities for genuine connection and mutual support. These professional developments validated the broader applicability of the strategic approach I had developed for managing family financial coordination, while reinforcing the importance of maintaining clear standards for respectful treatment across all relationships. The transformation that had begun with a vacation cancellation decision had evolved into expertise that provided value to other professionals facing comparable challenges. During this period, my marketing agency continued to expand its organizational development consulting services, leveraging the relationship management expertise that had developed through personal boundary-setting experiences. Corporate clients increasingly sought guidance about managing complex stakeholder dynamics, implementing accountability measures, and establishing clear communication protocols that would enhance organizational effectiveness while reducing conflicts and misunderstandings. The business growth provided additional validation that investing in personal development and relationship skills generated professional benefits that extended far beyond the immediate circumstances that had motivated the initial changes. The confidence and strategic thinking capabilities that had emerged from family relationship transformation proved valuable assets in multiple professional contexts. 8 months after the vacation incident, my mother initiated a comprehensive discussion about implementing permanent changes to family financial coordination that would formalize the respectful interaction patterns that had begun to develop among family members who had embraced the new standards. Her proposal represented the most substantial acknowledgement of systemic problems and commitment to fundamental change that any family member had offered during the entire transformation process. The conversation revealed that she had been conducting extensive reflection about her role in enabling the exploitative patterns that had characterized family relationships for many years. Her position as coordinator of family financial requests had created systematic dependency relationships while failing to encourage individual family members to develop greater self-reliance and accountability for their financial decisions and obligations. She acknowledged that the informal approach to family financial assistance had created ambiguous expectations and obligations that had ultimately damaged relationships while establishing unsustainable patterns of dependency and exploitation. The lack of clear procedures and accountability measures had enabled casual presumption and emotional manipulation, while failing to provide appropriate recognition and appreciation for the sacrifices involved in providing financial support. Most significantly, she proposed establishing formal family policies that would apply consistent standards to all members while creating transparent procedures for requesting assistance and clear accountability measures for ensuring appropriate appreciation and reciprocal consideration. Her proposal included regular family meetings to discuss financial coordination openly, documented procedures for evaluating assistance requests, and systematic approaches to ensuring that family activities reflected collaborative planning and shared responsibility rather than one-sided funding and exclusion. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.